In this video, we're gonna implement some list animations to animate the items while scrolling up and down, inspired from this tweet on Twitter by Rafael, showcasing some examples of list scroll item viewability animations. So in this case, we're gonna see how to implement all of these in Reanimated. So here we have a basic initial list implementation, and to keep track of the items viewable by the user on screen or items that are outside, we can use FlatList prop on viewable items changed, as well as another helper prop, viewability config, where we can define the criteria of the callback and the data including viewable items. Like here, we're telling it to only consider an item viewable if it covers at least 10% of the viewport. Next, declare a shared value to store an array of index of the viewable items. The viewable items also contains other information, but we only require the index position for the animation purpose. Finally, pass this as a prop to the list item. Now first we're going to do the blur and rotate animation. So in the use animated style hook, we will check if the viewable shared value contains the item's index, meaning that the item is currently active, and we will rotate it by 15 degrees if it is not visible anymore. Now apply the style and change the view to animated. Now similarly, do the same for rotate X property for a little 3D tilt, and together apply perspective with a value of 1000. You can change this value to adjust the effect of the rotate X, and a bit of scaling for the item. Now also we need an inverse rotate effect at the top, so we can check if the item is out of the view from the top by comparing the index is less than the first visible item, and based on that, just apply the negative rotate value. Now we will apply blur effect using expo blur and position it absolute to the item, but because of perspective it will clip the item, which we can avoid by applying Z index on the blur view. Right now the blur will apply on all the items, so we also need to animate it. For that, we will create blur views animated component and use that. Next, to animate blur intensity prop, we need to use Reanimated's use animated props hook, and similar to how we did with items transform style, we can animate the blur intensity as well. Finally, remove the intensity prop and apply the hook's value to the animated component's animate props property. And we're done. It's compatible with both Android and iOS. Also keep in mind that Android one is only for demonstration purpose, but the blur effect on Android is pretty expensive. So I personally wouldn't recommend an effect like this, at least on Android. Next we're going to do the second animation which blurs and scale the item on change of the viewability. So similar to how we did previously, in use animated style, check if the viewable shared value contains the item's index and scale the item accordingly. Apply the style to the view and change it to animated. Next, apply the blur view and animate its intensity based on item's visibility. And that's it. Now the third animation, which scale and image contrast the item. Here we can continue from the previous animation code, but we will keep the blur intensity little for this one. Next, wrap the image with a container view. It can have the same style, but to make radius work, we also need to apply overhidden. Next, clone the image component, which will be used as the grayscale version of the image. But to apply the grayscale, we can use one package called Reactnative Color Matrix Filters, which provides a grayscale component, and we're going to wrap the cloned image item with that. But similar to blur, it's only going to show when its visibility changes. So we're going to change it to animated and animate its opacity based on the item's visibility, same as we did for item scale and blur intensity. And finally apply the style. But the package used for image contrast has support only for Android and iOS, and if you want to also support web, we can use this, where it will use the plugin for mobile, but in case of web it will use the grayscale filter style. Next, we can just replace the usage of this package with our custom component. Then wrap it on the image with animated view as a parent on which we will apply the opacity animation. And with this, the final animation is also completed. Next, let's see what we would change if using Reanimated with Moti. First, change the container view with Moti view and animated style with derived value, and apply it to the Moti view's animate property. Then remove the individual with timing usage and directly define the config in the Moti view's transition prop. That's it. We can do similar changes for second animation and the third one. Now let's see how we can approach this without using any external library with just the built-in animated API. First, we will use the same viewable items changed and viewable config props. Now in case of Reanimated, we could listen to changes in shared value in animated style, animated props or other reanimated hooks. But that's not the case without using Reanimated, as we need to use useRef hook. So here we're gonna instead save list of animated values for each list item. Next, in the viewable items changed callback, we're gonna loop through this, and for non-viewable items, set the animation value to 1, and in case of top, we'll set it to -1. The reason for this is because we're going to use this range to interpolate values for animation in the list item. Then finally pass the viewables as a prop. Now with the first animation using viewables array, we can access animated value for a particular item through index and interpolate between -1 to 1 through 0. Like here we're doing for rotate property. If -1 or at the top, its value will be -15 degree and +15 degree at the bottom. Next, make sure to change view to animated and apply it as a style. Next, we can repeat same interpolation for rotate X, then apply perspective and interpolation for scale as well. Apply the blur view same as earlier. Because of rotate X, it clips the item, so we apply the Z index. Next, to animate blur view, change it to animated and same as other, interpolate its intensity. And it's done. Next, for the second animation, steps are pretty much same. Interpolate the scale, change view to animated and apply the style. Apply the blur view, change it to animated and interpolate its intensity, and that's it. And for the third animation, we can continue from the last animation code but with minor blur value. Wrap the image with a container view, overflow hidden to make radius work. Clone the image component, install the required package for grayscale the image, and apply the grayscale on the cloned image, change it to animated, and same as we did for other, interpolate its opacity. But same as we did with Reanimated implementation, to support web as well, we can instead use our grayscale component, which uses the plugin for mobile but grayscale filters CSS style on the web. And we're done. And finally, a little tip. When you're using viewable item change and config prop, you may often face this continuous error while hot reloading. Then we can do following changes to get around this, like separate config.json and callback function value, and use it through useRef or useCallback. Or we can use another helper function for this, viewability config callback pairs. Then the error should be gone.